Are we live?
Okay. Hey everybody, it's Marcia from Be So Creative. We are so thrilled that Ellen, one of our gals here at Be So Creative, has got the cutest project for y'all today. She's going to, from start to finish, show you how to make an absolutely adorable little bag out of scraps. So, Miss Ellen, take it away.
Hello, sewists. Welcome. Happy Tuesday. If you are a regular sewist or you do a lot of quilting, you have a lot of these. Right? Does this look familiar? How about these? This lovely batting, you always trim your quilt and you have these strips of batting. What in the world do you do with them? You paid good money, you bought good quality. What are you going to do with that? Well, we've got a great project today for you to use up these scraps that you probably would have just considered throwing away because there's just no reason to use them, right? Too much trouble. All right, I gotta pick my mess up off the floor here and show you one of the projects that I made out of just using things that I was gonna throw away. Those little pieces of batting, little strips. This was some Christmas fabric that we had a couple of years ago, and I took some of the strips are so tiny, gosh, they're probably about 3/4 of an inch wide, and here I'm using them, this bag, to make a completely new piece of fabric out of little pieces that you probably were going to throw away. So what we're going to do is build our own quilted, pre-quilted fabric, which can be very pricey if you buy it off the bolt. And here you have all the materials right in your own stash. We're going to be working with one. This fabric isn't available anymore, unfortunately. I'm sure you could use your own version of Christmas scraps, but we're going to be building one today out of the Tula Pink collection that we do still have this fabric here at the store. And we've been doing lots of projects with this fabric, so we have lots of scraps left over for it. So when I begin, I try to think about what project I'm making. In this case, it's going to be a little bag, and how big of a piece of quilted fabric I'm going to need to start with. And I take a piece of paper and I draw that rectangle, approximate size that I want, right on a piece of paper. And I'm going to lay this piece of paper on a table, and this is what I'm going to use to sort of audition my pattern. So we're going to go over here to my flannel board, and I'll show you how that happens. So if this is your piece of paper, you are going to start taking your leftover strips, and you can use strips that are anywhere from 3/4 to 1 inch wide, all the way up to maybe 2 or 2.5 inches wide. And you want lots of different widths, so 1 inch, 1.5 inches, 1.25 inches, 2 inches, 1 3/4. Different widths will help. You want to go on a 45-degree angle. And it's easy to find a 45-degree angle when you have a rectangle. All you need to do is fold up one corner so that this side is parallel with that side, crease it, and that shows you exactly where a 45-degree angle is. And so on my flannel board, I would do that about like that. I'm going to just finger crease that, and that gives me an idea of where that 45 is. And I'm going to start with one of my fatter pieces, and I'm going to lay it right here along that 45-degree, and it's just going to sit there. I like to start somewhere in the middle of the rectangle. And now I'm going to start playing with some of my other strips here. I've got different ones. I can see that that one isn't quite big enough, so that one's probably going to work down, maybe a little bit down here. I'm just going to start playing around. I want to make sure that that strip fits all the way across and has enough hanging over. And you do want to lap these over about 1/2 inch, because when you sew them together, you'll have some seam allowances to take up. So I'll make sure that that goes from side to side. I'll maybe take an orange one here and see how I like that one there. Lap it over 1/2 inch. And I'm just playing at this point. This is all on a piece of paper. It's going to be flat on your table, so you can lift these up, put different ones. If you don't like the color or the width arrangement, you can arrange small ones, mix small ones with large ones, mix your colors up, And you're going to cover this from top to bottom with all your little strips. Get an arrangement you like, and then you are ready to sew. So I'm going to lift this up a moment and show you that, well, actually, when you get ready to do your sewing, you're going to take now some of that scrap batting that you had and cut it that same width. In this case, I did 9 by 16. And now you're going to start to sew. So you're going to take your piece of batting. You're going to go look at your preview, the one that you laid out on the piece of paper, and you're going to start taking the strips from your piece of paper and then transferring them over to your batting, just like you laid them out. So you already have them laid out the way you like them. So the first one that I had there was this piece of purple. So I'm going to lay it out there in the middle. And the next one was this green. So now I'm going to take this green, I'm going to flip it over so it's right sides together. I'm going to align those raw edges. And now I'm going to go over to my sewing machine, and I'm going to be sewing a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Along that edge, I'm going to sew through both pieces of fabric and right through my batting. And let me show you what that looks like when it gets sewn on there. So here I have taken my piece of batting. I started with this one. I added a green, and there's my seam allowance. And once I get that sewn, I'm going to flatten that over, and I'm going to go to my iron and press that nicely. I want to press it because I want to make sure I don't have any little pleats here. And the problem with this project is once you sew the next one on down here, it's too late to go back and press this. It's all sewn down and you can't press it. So make sure it's nice and flat first. Then I'm going to pick up whatever I auditioned on my paper. I'm going to pick that strip up, and I'm going to come over here. And this one maybe was going to go on top, so I'm going to lay that one on top. Sew, press that one over. Then I'm going to come down here on the bottom. I'll take another one here, right sides together. Now I'm going to sew to the green strip right along here, and when I press that over, same thing. I will fold that, press it, and I'm going to continue that way, transferring them from my practice sheet, my audition sheet, over to my real thing and sewing all the way to the bottom. When you get completely finished, you're going to have something that looks like a big mess. And it looks like this. And really, there's nothing very appealing about that. It just looks like another big mess. But you can see that there is my rectangle of batting. I've gotten it all covered. I've sewn all the way through all the layers. There's those diagonal lines. And where the real fun is when you take this to the cutting table and trim this. So let me show you how I do that. I like to trim this with the good side down because I want to see my batting. I need to know where my batting is. And all you will need to do is come over here with your ruler, find your 45-inch mark. It's right here. If you run that 45-inch mark, now I did not sew these quite on the 45-inch, but you will, hopefully. And when you run that along the 45-inch mark, I'm going to come over here as far as I can, and I am just going to cut through all that mess right there. Flip it. And now I'm going to come here to the other side. You can already see it starting to take the shape of of a rectangle. Now I'll finish off the top edges. And my last edge. And now we get to see the beautiful result. And this is really starting to look like something. I've now created a beautiful piece of new fabric that I can use in my little bag, or some other projects that I'm going to show you. Now there's one other variation you can do on this. If you would like to go ahead and put a piece of backing fabric on this before you sew it, then you'll end up having a completely backed little piece of quilt. This will all have a backing. The quilting lines will be all the way through the backing, and really all you would have to do, if you had a little rectangle of that, all you would have to do is put a binding around that and you would have a hot pad right off the bat. That's one of the easiest projects you could make with this. Let me show you now how I turn this into a couple of projects. So this piece I would now cut in half, and I would use one half and the other half as my front and back of this little bag pattern. And I'm actually not going to teach the whole way to do this bag pattern because you may have a bag pattern or bag instructions that you like the best. But we are going to put the instructions to this little zippered bag on the website for you, so you can at least get the instructions for mine. And when you use those instructions, all you will have to do is skip the first step. The first step shows you how to take a piece of fabric and quilt it to the batting. Yours will already be quilted because you already did that step here. So you'll have a front and a back piece. It'll teach you how to add a little lining inside of here, how to install a zipper, and you might even have a zipper on hand. You might not even have to buy a zipper. And with just things that you were probably going to throw away or never use, you've got a whole project very easy. Let me show you another idea. Well, let me just tell you that if you made this big enough, and you can make it any size you like, this would be a gorgeous Christmas stocking. Think of making it bigger. You can cut your stocking shape. You can make two, cut your stocking shape out, sew them right sides together, and you've got a darling Christmas stocking. We already talked about making a hot pad out of it. And let me show you one other idea. I made a set of placemats for my home, and this is 6 squares of that same technique. I just took strips, all my purple strips from my stash. I started just laying them out and sewing them kind of randomly. In this case, I did go ahead and add a backing fabric before I started so that it was quilted all the way through. And then all I did was just take some another fabric that I had and just create a sashing to hook them together so the raw edge is covered. And that's kind of a quilt as you go technique. Imagine if you made enough blocks, you could have a quilt the size of a bed to put on a whole bed with this technique, only using these little things that were laying around in your stash. You could probably cover a whole bed quilt with it. So great ideas for using up your scraps, your nice quality fabric that you hate to throw away, you paid good money for it. Here's a way to use everything you have and come up with some nice little projects and gift ideas. So thank you for watching.
Well, there's one question.
Okay, let's hear a question.
What batting did you use?
Well, I just grabbed batting out of my stash, but I have two kinds here. I usually am sewing with Dream Cotton. What's the thinnest one? The thinnest one. It's the pink, in the pink bag. And that's usually what I have on hand, and so that is the batting that I put in these. This is a little thicker. This is the blue one, the select one, and that would make a nice bag too. It would just be a little puffier bag. You don't even have to really use batting. You could even just sew this to felt or just to another piece of fabric. You could just sew it to another piece of fabric. You wouldn't have any puffiness in it, any heft, but you could make a thinner bag. So just any piece of fabric that you can sew the strips onto will work.
Thank you, Ellen.